Right, hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my beginner series. I am UnoPro, and today we are going to be going over playing around our opponent's cards. Now I think this is an extremely important concept, and basically every player can improve in this regard. So I'm going to be breaking down each spell school for you, seeing the key cards that are played in main decks, and I'm going to say a little bit about how we can play around these cards and prevent our opponent from using them to their full potential. At the end, I do have a really exciting announcement for you guys. I'm going to start doing some replay analysis for you guys. So there'll be more of that at the end. So let's get straight into it today. Now, first up, we have the Fire School. Fire School has a couple of cheap spells that really allow it to be aggressive, and you'll see a lot of Inferno decks and Stronghold decks with fire using that to really be aggressive. Now there are other options in the late game for control decks with fire, which we'll come to in a second. So first of all, we have Firebolt. It's been a staple card. It's been around forever, and it's really just a part of the game now. So, one resource, deal 2 damage to a target creature. Pretty simple. It's efficient. 2 damage for 1 resource is pretty good. Okay, so basic ways of playing around this, leaving creatures 2 health is obviously better off not doing that. We can also target our creatures that we want to protect with Day of the Sanctuary to make them untargetable if they will die to Firebolt. And we also need to consider this when deciding whether we want to block or not. So if we have a full health creature, our opponent has a 2 attack creature, they have fire magic, then it is really risky to block early game, as 1 Firebolt and an attack will kill off your creature for only 1 resource. So that is something we want to avoid. And leading on to this, we have a new card that's come out with Griffin Bane, the Forked Firebolt, and it's basically 2 Firebolts in 1 for 3 resources. So the counterplay to this is the same, though the advantage of this for us is that we do have a shorter period at the start of the game where our opponent won't have access to this card. And also it must target 2 creatures if it can. So if you only have 1 creature out on the board, your opponent will be forced to target his own creature. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, those 2 will go into most decks with fire. Maybe not a full 4 of Forked Firebolt, but very likely 4 Firebolts in a deck. Now, Akrath's Wrath. This is one of the most potent AoE effects since the release of BS2. So basically it's dealing 5 damage to all creatures, and this damage cannot be prevented or reduced. So this basically means that it will go through spell resist, magic shield type effects, but won't stop those black cell crushers with an enemy spell ward. So not every deck is going to play it. It does have high resource requirements of 5, as well as a high resource requirement for 5 magic. Now this means it basically will not really fit into many aggressive decks, but there are late game control decks that will try and slow their opponent down until the late game, and so they'll definitely be running this. So it can be quite obvious if your opponent is running this, if they're a fire hero, they're continuing to level their magic up. Once it gets to 4, you have to start being pretty cautious about this. So the way we play against this is like with a lot of other powerful AoEs. We want to avoid playing too many creatures. We may have the option of playing creatures that have more than 5 health to leave at least something on the board. So it's pretty straightforward. We don't want to overextend. We want to reserve back, just slowly develop our board. Okay, so that's the Fire School. On to the Earth School. Now, there's only 1 card here for the Earth School, as there isn't really a lot of good cards that the Earth School has access to. But this one in particular has got to be one of the best spells in the game. For only 3 magic, it has a powerful AoE effect of 3 damage to all creatures. Now if you don't know what I mean by AoE, it's basically just area effect, and it's used in many terms. Basically anything that's going to be damaging a large amount of creatures. So 3 damage to all creatures, one of the best board clears in standard at the moment. And this can not only help you just for killing off creatures by themselves, but if you have a board as well, it will help you deal damage to your opponent's creatures so you can finish them off with your own. So this is a really important card. you will run into a lot of heroes using Earth Magic, as it is extremely strong with this Insect Swarm, even if for nothing else apart from that. So guys, you will definitely need to learn how to play around Insect Swarm if you wish to have any success on the ladder. Now, onto the Water School. We have a couple really powerful spells in here. A fair few heroes using water magic at the moment in standard. So let's get into it. We have Geyser, one of the most extremely powerful spells in standard once again. Basically the ability to deal damage to one creature and a couple of other creatures. Now there is pretty clear counterplay with this card. So basically this card is countered by zigzag like effects. So placing one in the front, one in the back, basically making it so that you can target one creature but will never get any hits off on adjacent creatures. So we need to keep this card in mind and try and zigzag our creatures if we can. Fortunately, this also helps with the next card, Ice Meteor. Now, Ice Meteor does basically the same thing, but dealing 6 damage to target creature and all adjacent creatures, with the bonus of instantly destroying any fire creatures. Now, unlike Geyser, Ice Meteor is not likely to go in every water deck with spells, more the late game controlling ones. But if you see your opponent upping to 4 and 5 magic, you definitely need to start being aware, as if you are unprepared for this card, it can absolutely demolish your board in a second. Now I've included one more, Ice Spikes. Now Ice Spikes isn't the most popular card, it's just dealing 2 damage to all creatures on a target line, but maybe your deck is running 1 or 2 of, and it's definitely something to keep in mind, as there's really no reason to play into this card, as we can play around it quite easily if we are paying attention. Now, on to the Prime skill. Now, a lot of Prime is about tempo and time. So this really fits in with the first 2 cards, Town Portal and Time Jump. So, Town Portal's a pretty simple card. Returns target creature to its owner's hand. Now, obviously it may seem hard to play around such a unique and very general overlapping card, but there are a couple things we should keep in mind. For example, if we're playing a stack deck against a hero with prime magic and the magic up to 3, we need to be careful about wasting too many cards to increase stacks before we have a chance to attack. It's basically one Town Portal is going to mean all of those cards we used to get stacks on that creature have been wasted. So that's something to keep in mind, as well as buffing cards, especially before you attack with them. Okay, and so on to the next one, Time Jump, one of the most powerful cards in all standard, though you won't see it in every prime deck because it does have that high magic requirements once again, but basically it's going to skip one of your opponent's turns, but you do not gain any resources. So this can be a really powerful finisher, or it can fight back for board control. So basically, the main way it's used is basically you can move creatures down to an open lane, and then skip to the next turn and attack with them, or you can play a creature from your hand and then attack with it again, basically skipping your opponent's turn and attacks, so all the creatures either gain double attack or quick attack. So this is extremely powerful and definitely hard to play around, but there are a couple of things we can keep in mind. If it is late in the game, we're at a low health total, we know our opponent has access to Time Jump, we need to try and keep all the lanes blocked off as much as we can. And then another thing we can do against this is we basically know we need to keep pressuring our opponent, as this is an extremely potent late game card, and try and keep our opponent's board clear so they can't just simply move a bunch of creatures down into open lanes and then attack. We need to try and keep them clear, so you're going to have to play creatures from hand, and if they're playing creatures from hand, that means they have less resources and less they can do aside from the Time Jump. Now I have a new card introduced with Griffinbane, Disintegration, extremely resource efficient removal with 8 damage to a creature for only 4 resources, but it does have the downside of being a 5 magic requirement. Now against such a versatile card, there's not a lot we can do apart from making our creatures untargetable and avoiding buffing them too heavily before they get a chance to do anything, if it will still die to disintegration anyway. So Prime is very versatile, couple of unique cards in here, so just need to consider really making sure that we don't waste our buff spells our stacks on creatures that will be able to simply be killed off anyway. Next, on to the Dark School. Now, at the moment, Dark School is not shining like it once was, but the Dark School is really dependent on the state of the meta. In a slow meta, the Dark School can absolutely dominate the game, but in a faster meta, there's less bigger creatures, a lot of smaller creatures which Dark doesn't deal with particularly well. Okay, so first off, we're going to start with Salt Reaver. Now, Salt Reaver destroys target creature for 4 resources. Pretty simple card, very versatile, and there's not a lot we can do against it. There are a couple counters that exist. So we have Black Skull Crushers with enemy spell ward, and then making our creatures untargetable. So pretty standard stuff there. Now next onto Enthrall. Enthrall is an enchantment spell, which is basically going to gain control of a target creature and relocate it to a valid battleground position on our side of the board. Now, there are a couple ways we can deal with Enthrall. So we can remove the Enthrall as it is an ongoing enchantment, so any spell removal, anything that returns it to hand will return your creature to your hand. Okay, so that's one counter. In DLC, also returning a creature to its owner's hand will actually return it to your hand. So it's not like Hearthstone, where it will return to the new owner's hand. This will always return to the original owner's hand. This is the same if you get a card out of someone else's deck and then return it to your hand. It will return to the original owner's hand. So that's one thing. So we've got Broken Bridge, Town Portals, Zephyria, stuff like that. The other option, if we don't have an answer in our hand, we see our opponent's gone up to 6 magic and 6 resources, we need to start playing pretty carefully. So we may want to, instead of playing one really big creature, we may choose to play a couple of small creatures, so our opponent isn't going to destroy us with one big enthrall. So small creatures and ways to bounce creatures back to their hands are definitely the counter to enthrall. But it is an extremely powerful card in a slow meta where lots of big creatures are being played, and you have the time to increase your requirements to 6 magic. Now onto the Light School. For a while, the Light School has been pretty mediocre, but with some new introductions from Griffinbane, we do have a little bit of hope for the Light School. So first of all, we have a common from Griffinbane called Sunblaze, which is going to deal damage to all enemy creatures on a target row. Now, in playing around this card, we play around it fairly similar to playing around Firebolts and Forked Firebolts, except we don't want to focus our creatures in a lane. Definitely don't want to leave 2 creatures with only 2 health in our lane, or where our opponents will be able to use that damage to kill both of our creatures off. So it's pretty simple. We don't stack our creatures in the same lanes, especially if they're worth. Now, Blinding Light has basically given Light School some hard removal in standard at the moment. So basically, enchanted creature is immobilized and gains cannot attack and phased. So basically, what this means is you can't move the creature. It cannot attack, and phased will mean that other creatures will not be able to attack it and will be able to attack through it. So basically, if we compare it to Soul Reaver, it does a similar effect in basically taking a card out of the game, but it does have some downsides and a couple of advantages. So the downsides are that it can be countered. So basically, it allows us to return the card to hand, which will remove the effect of Blinding Light. We can play stuff that prevents our creatures from being prevented from attacking, which will allow it to attack while still remaining at phase, which can actually be a really useful ability. Classes like Stronghold can Sacrificial Altar on the creature, so they're still managing to deal a lot of damage to a creature with something that was supposedly killed off. But the advantage it does have is it does waste a spot on the battleground that can't be replaced and cannot be defended. So if I have 2 creatures with Blinding Light on them in a row, there's no way my opponent can defend without first somehow killing off those creatures. Now the next one we have is the simple AoE of Word of Light, dealing 2 damage to all enemy creatures. Pretty similar to playing around most AoEs, basically just avoiding overcommitting too many low health creatures to the board. And just always considering if my opponent plays this, how much of my board can he clear and how bad is that for me. So onto the last school we have is the air school. Now honestly, the air school is pretty weak like right now in standard, but there are a couple of cards that may fit into some decks, which we should just always be aware of. Now normally these ones won't be in a full set of 4, but it's always important to try and consider and play around them if we do have the option. So first we have Chain Lightning, pretty standard, deal 3 damage to a battleground position with no creature, and then deal 3 damage to all creatures adjacent to that position. Now, this card can be hard to play around at times, as against a lot of spells, we want to be avoiding stacking our creatures and playing them in the same row, which can actually be punished quite heavily by Chain Lightning. So it's really hard to find that balance of playing around both and say something like Geyser. The next thing we have to worry about is Father Sky's Wrath. Now this is a card that can go from being extremely strong in certain metas to pretty irrelevant in other metas. So against decks like Stronghold and Inferno, who don't run a lot of flyers, the card is basically an overcost town port. But against a deck like Necro, where it's going to be running a lot of flyers, this card can actually completely win you games by returning a creature to hand, which is always good, and then managing to kill off over half the board, which is composed of flyers, and this can be absolutely devastating. So it's not something you're going to run across too often, especially in this Stronghold dominated meta. But if the meta changes to Necro or something else, just always keep an eye out for it. And if you think your opponent might have it, then just avoid playing a couple of flyers. Alright, so on to the announcement. I'll say one more. So we have Neutral Fortunes. So these can be played by any deck, but these ones are mainly played in Fortune decks and the Seeker Heroes. So what I mean by the Seeker Heroes are the 6 original heroes who have stats of 1, 1, 2. So they start off with a 2 Fortune stats, and this basically gives them easy access to stuff like Broken Bridge and Campfire. Now, Broken Bridge, returning all creatures on a target row to their owner's hand. Now this does have the option of opening up to finish game, but the main way we're going to be playing around this card is we're going to be, if we know our opponent could easily be running these cards in their deck, we're going to be avoiding playing 2 high cost creatures in the same row, or really buffing our creatures up too much and making a really strong lane, because that will be easily punished. Now, it doesn't generate card advantage, but if we spend, let's say, 7 mana making a lane, and then our opponent plays Broken Bridge, they just gain a 4 mana advantage there. And that can be really huge in a very tempo-based game such as DOC. Now, the last one I have is a Unique Fortune, Altar of Asher. And we can really know this one. Our opponent has this if they've gone up to 4 Fortune. So it's basically the only thing most decks will be running if they have already gone up to 4 Fortune. There are a lot of creature-based Fortune decks will be running this card, so we need to be aware. So it's a pretty simple card. Both options of the card involve destroying a target friendly creature first. Then we can either destroy a target enemy creature, or we can choose a creature card from our graveyard and deploy it for free. So basically the way we play around this card is not very easy. Destroying a target creature is pretty general and hard to play around, apart from stuff like Day of the Sanctuary, of course. What we can do is play around stuff like destroying a friendly creature and then resurrecting a creature from the graveyard. And this can be especially important against Stronghold decks such as Cat, where basically they can return a Shredder for the finisher. So the way we play against this is just making sure we have all lanes blocked off, or specifically blocking a War Tent. So it is a hard card to play around, but we always need to consider this kind of thing. And so it's not the easiest card to play around, but it is pretty obvious when our opponent is running it if they've already increased their Fortune to 4 Fortune, as most decks will be running nothing above 3 Fortune with every other card. So on to the announcement. I'm extremely excited for this one. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to ask you guys to basically send in replays of your own games. Basically, ones you want to improve on. I'll show you mistakes. I will go over the games. So the way you can do this is you can send the direct replay file, or you can upload them to mmdoctools.com. And basically, I want you to, when you send the email, basically just include some information about how long you've been playing the game, how you've gotten it ranked, areas you feel you can improve on, or you simply don't understand, and then just give me some general thoughts on the game if you're enjoying it. So thanks to Ubisoft and some of the community managers, each replay I do for the video series will receive a free Griffin Bane Super Pack. So not only will you get a pack from the new series, it will contain at least a rare or an epic, as well you get 2 wild cards. So more information can be found. So I just wanted to give a big thanks to Ubisoft for allowing me to do this. I'm really excited to have a look at you guys' replays and help you improve. So if you have any questions, feedback, anything, of course, leave it below. Feel free to subscribe if you wish to follow the series. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope together we can really develop our knowledge of the game and help you new players really get into this game, because it honestly is a really great game. We really just need players to get into the game to really recognize how good it is and how potentially good it can be. So thank you very much, guys.